Chicago in the 1920s was a city alive with the pulse of industry, culture, and unrelenting ambition. This was an era of transformation, of skyscrapers rising to kiss the clouds and jazz dancing through the night. But beneath the glamour and progress lay an underworld governed by a different set of rules. A world of power, greed, and violence, ruled by the iron fist of organized crime. And at the center of it all was one man, Alphonse Scarface Capone. His name, etched in history, is synonymous with prohibition, bootlegging, and bloodshed. To understand the rise of Capone is to understand the turbulent times that birthed him. A young man from Brooklyn who climbed the ranks of organized crime to become the most feared and influential mob boss in America. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born on January 17, 1899, in the rough neighborhoods of Brooklyn, New York. His parents, Gabrielle and Teresa Capone, were hard-working Italian immigrants who sought the American dream. But for young Al, the streets of Brooklyn offered a far different education, one built on survival and ambition. Capone was one of 9 children. The family lived modestly, but like many immigrant families of the time, they faced poverty and discrimination. From an early age, Al learned the importance of resilience and street smarts. Though his parents hoped for him to rise through honest labor, Capone's education came not from textbooks, but from the rough and unforgiving streets. Despite their best efforts, Capone's teachers found him difficult to manage. At the age of 14, after striking a teacher, Capone left school for good. It was not a lack of intelligence that drove him away, but a defiant spirit and desire to carve his own path. Capone's formal education may have ended, but his apprenticeship was just beginning. By his teenage years, he had fallen under the influence of local street gangs. One in particular, the 5 Points Gang, would become his gateway to the criminal underworld. Led by the notorious Paul Kelly, the 5 Points Gang was one of New York's most powerful and violent criminal organizations. It was in the ranks of the 5 Points Gang that Capone learned the ropes of organized crime, racketeering, extortion, and the art of intimidation. Here, he met his mentor, Johnny Torrio, a sharp and calculating mobster who recognized Capone's potential. Capone's rise through the ranks was not without its scars, both literal and figurative. One fateful night at a Brooklyn nightclub, an altercation over a woman left Capone with 3 slashes. Though the wounds healed, the scars remained, earning him the infamous nickname, Scarface. It was a title Capone despised, but the legend it created only amplified his notoriety. In 1919, Johnny Torrio called Capone to Chicago, where opportunities for organized crime flourished. Torrio was expanding his operations, capitalizing on the booming illicit alcohol trade brought on by Prohibition. For Capone, this was the chance of a lifetime, a chance to build his empire. Prohibition, enacted in 1920, aimed to cleanse America of alcohol's influence. Instead, it fueled a surge in organized crime. The demand for illegal alcohol gave rise to bootlegging operations across the nation. Torrio and Capone were among the first to seize this opportunity, creating an extensive smuggling network. By the early 1920s, Capone and Torrio's bootlegging operation was one of the most lucrative in Chicago. They bribed police officers, judges, and politicians, ensuring their illicit business thrived under the protection of corrupt officials. Capone quickly learned that success in the underworld required more than muscle. It required strategy, loyalty, and a web of connections stretching across the city. Capone oversaw every detail, from smuggling routes to speakeasy distribution. His empire extended from secret breweries hidden in basements to luxury nightclubs packed with Chicago's elite. By 1924, the Chicago outfit, as it was known, controlled the majority of the city's illicit alcohol supply. In 1925, Torrio's reign came to an abrupt end. An assassination attempt left him wounded and shaken. Seeing the writing on the wall, Torrio made a fateful decision. He retired, passing the mantle to his most trusted protege. At just 26 years old, Al Capone assumed full control of the Chicago outfit. With Torrio's blessing, Capone ruled with an iron fist, expanding his operations beyond bootlegging to gambling, prostitution, and extortion. Capone wasted no time consolidating power. Rival gangs who refused to cooperate faced swift retribution. His reputation for brutality became legendary, but Capone was not without charm. In public, he portrayed himself as a generous businessman, donating to charities and hosting community events. Capone was more than a criminal. He was a symbol of the contradictions that defined the Roaring Twenties. To some, he was a hero, a modern-day Robin Hood who defied the authorities and spread his wealth to the needy. To others, he was a ruthless tyrant, willing to spill blood to maintain control. But Capone's grip on Chicago came at a cost. Gang wars erupted, painting the streets red with blood. Over 500 gangland murders occurred under Capone's rule, as rival factions clashed for dominance. This St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929 remains one of the most infamous events of Capone's reign. 7 members of the North Side Gang, led by Capone's arch-rival George Bugs Moran, were gunned down in cold blood. The murders were shocking not only for their brutality, but for the calculated precision with which they were carried out. Though Capone denied involvement, the message was clear: no one could challenge his authority. But as Capone's empire grew, so did the efforts to bring him down. One man stood at the forefront: Eliot Ness, a Prohibition agent determined to dismantle Capone's operations. Ness assembled a special task force known as the Untouchables, incorruptible agents who couldn't be bought or intimidated. While local law enforcement turned a blind eye, Ness and his team relentlessly pursued Capone's bootlegging network. The pressure began to mount, but the case that would ultimately lead to Capone's downfall lay not in the realm of murder or smuggling, but in accounting. Capone's lavish lifestyle and untraceable income caught the attention of federal prosecutors. In 1931, after years of investigation, Capone was charged with tax evasion, a crime that seemed insignificant compared to his long list of offenses, yet it carried enough weight to bring him down. Capone's trial captivated the nation. Despite his attempts to manipulate jurors, the evidence was overwhelming. In October 1931, Al Capone was found guilty and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Capone served much of his sentence in the notorious Alcatraz prison. Isolated and stripped of his former power, he became a shadow of the man who once ruled Chicago. Years of untreated syphilis ravaged his mind, leaving him delusional and frail. In 1939, Capone was released from prison, but his days as a kingpin were long behind him. He retired to his mansion in Palm Island, Florida, living in seclusion. On January 25, 1947, at the age of 48, Al Capone died from heart failure. His death marked the end of an era, but the legend of Scarface endures. Al Capone's legacy is one of contradiction. A man who rose to power through violence, but remains a fixture of American folklore. His story is a reminder of the complexities of power, the allure of crime, and the inevitable fall of even the mightiest figures.